10-year-old male, severe trauma, not breathing, possible DOA. A 10-year-old boy, full of life, full of dreams, now lifeless on the floor of his own home. The horror he endured in his final moments is beyond comprehension. The sheer brutality of his injuries sent shockwaves through the city. But what if I told you this didn't have to happen? This was Ayden Wolfe, 10 years old, a child like any other. He had dreams, favorite cartoons, and a world of possibility ahead of him. But in the final moments of his life, all of that was stolen. The story should have ended differently. Someone should have protected him. But as investigators peeled back the layers of what really happened inside that apartment, they uncovered something even more disturbing. This was no random tragedy. This was a slow-moving storm, building for months, maybe even years, and yet no one stopped it. Authorities believed they had their suspect, a man with a violent history, but when they started asking questions, the answers were not what they expected. Because this wasn't just a case of one man's monstrous actions. No, this was something more sinister, something that had been overlooked again and again. This case was supposed to be simple, a tragic but straightforward story of a child lost to abuse. But what if I told you, Ayden's story wasn't just about what happened inside that apartment? What if I told you, the system meant to protect him failed him instead? If you don't do something, that boy won't make it. Someone did try to warn them, but no one listened. A 10-year-old boy, trapped in a nightmare no one saved him from. The bruises on his body told one story, but the secrets behind his death, they told another. Tonight, we go beyond the headlines. We uncover the truth behind the tragic death of Ayden Wolfe, a story of neglect, of horror, and of warnings that came too late. Before his name became a tragic headline, before his story became a cautionary tale, Ayden Wolfe was just a boy who laughed, who played, who dreamed, but whose life was stolen far too soon. He was 10 years old. At that age, the world still feels full of possibilities. Days are measured in recess and bedtime stories, in favorite cartoons and after-school snacks. But for Ayden, that world wasn't as safe as it should have been. Ayden Wolfe grew up in Harlem, a neighborhood full of history, resilience, and life. A community where people look out for each other, where neighbors know your name. But behind closed doors, not every story is a happy one. He lived with his mother in a quiet apartment, just the two of them. To the outside world, it seemed like an ordinary home. But what went on behind that door, only Ayden knew. Ayden was small for his age, but his personality, that was big. He had a wide, toothy grin and an imagination that stretched far beyond the four walls of his apartment. He loved cartoons, Spider-Man, Pokemon, anything with adventure. His teachers said he was bright, curious, a little shy, but polite. The kind of child who never caused trouble, who always followed the rules. But that also meant when something was wrong, he wasn't the type to speak up. But behind Ayden's bright eyes, was there something else? Something hidden? Because looking back, those who knew him started asking the same question. Had there been signs? Did anyone notice? Or worse, did someone look the other way? To understand Ayden's life, we have to talk about his mother, because for the first 10 years of his life, she was his whole world. But how much do we really know about their relationship? She raised Ayden alone. No father in the picture. Some described her as quiet, private. Others said she kept to herself too much. But being private isn't a crime. Being quiet doesn't make someone guilty. So the real question is, was she just another victim in this story? Or was there something she chose not to see? Those closest to Ayden noticed something in the final weeks of his life. Something was different. His smile didn't reach his eyes the same way. He wasn't talking as much. And then, the absences started. One day, then another, and another. Until one day, Ayden Wolfe simply didn't come back. Did someone see this coming? Did someone sense the danger? And if they did, why didn't they stop it? Because the tragedy of Ayden Wolfe wasn't just about what happened inside that apartment. It was about all the moments before it. Behind that door, a nightmare was waiting to unfold. A nightmare in the shape of a man. This story isn't just about one tragic night. It isn't just about one victim. It's about something much larger, about the warning signs no one saw. Or worse, the ones they ignored. Because before he was a murderer, Rashawn Weaver was something else. A ticking time bomb. To understand what happened to Ayden Wolfe, we have to start with the man who stole his life. A man already familiar to the justice system. A name whispered in courtrooms, in police stations, on the very streets he prowled. Rashawn Weaver's story doesn't begin with Ayden Wolfe. It doesn't even begin with Ayden's mother. It begins years earlier, in a childhood filled with chaos, violence, and neglect. He wasn't born a monster, no one is, but somewhere along the way, something inside him broke. And when something breaks, it either gets fixed or it becomes dangerous. Some say monsters hide in the shadows, but sometimes they don't hide at all. Sometimes they walk right through the front door. At first, Rashawn Weaver wasn't a villain. He was a charmer, the kind that knows how to say all the right things. The kind that makes promises with no intention of keeping them. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she just wanted someone to care. Maybe, like so many others, she thought she could change him. But you don't change men like Rashawn Weaver. The first time he raised his voice, maybe it didn't seem like a big deal. The first time he grabbed her arm, maybe she thought it was a mistake. The first time she saw the anger in his eyes, maybe she told herself he didn't mean it. But abuse doesn't start with fists. It starts with control, with fear, with the slow, suffocating feeling that you're trapped and no one is coming to save you. People noticed. A neighbor heard yelling through the walls. A friend noticed the bruises. A teacher saw Ayden flinch when someone raised their voice. But no one did anything. And Ayden? He never said a word. He was only 10 years old. And maybe, just maybe, he still believed the world would protect him. For weeks, the violence inside that apartment escalated. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Because there was something else. Someone else. Rashawn Weaver wasn't the only monster in that house. In the days leading up to March 6, 2021, the world outside continued as normal. People went to work, children played in the parks, the city pulsed with life. But inside apartment 3A at the St. Nicholas houses in Harlem, time was running out. To understand the horror of Ayden Wolfe's final moments, we must go back to the days before his murder. Neighbors later recalled hearing muffled shouting from the apartment, something that had become a regular occurrence. But on these nights, the arguments lasted longer. The tone was different. Something was changing. Ayden, just 10 years old, was caught in the middle of it all. Classmates noticed he wasn't himself. Teachers saw a difference in his behavior. He was quiet, withdrawn. A child with something weighing heavily on his small shoulders. A child carrying a secret too terrifying to speak. The tension inside the apartment reached a breaking point. Something pushed Rashawn Weaver over the edge. Maybe it was control slipping from his grasp. Maybe it was something Ayden said. Maybe it was nothing at all. We don't know what words were exchanged. We don't know the exact moment when Rashawn decided that Ayden wouldn't live to see another day. Ayden was trapped. His mother wasn't there. He was alone with the man who would end his life. What happened next was nothing short of pure horror. The autopsy revealed a chilling truth. Ayden didn't die instantly. He was tortured. Forensic evidence showed blunt force trauma covering his small body. He suffered deep bruises, internal bleeding, and rib fractures. His spleen was lacerated, his lungs punctured, and his fragile, young body was broken beyond repair. A child. And yet, for hours, no one called for help. 911, what's your emergency? My son isn't breathing. The call finally came in at 2:19 p.m. But by then, it was far too late. Paramedics arrived within minutes. What they found inside apartment 3A was beyond words. A child's body, lifeless. His injuries so severe that even seasoned officers had to look away. For them, it was another crime scene, another tragedy, another name on a growing list of victims. But as investigators combed through the crime scene, something became clear. This wasn't the first time violence had filled these walls. This wasn't the first time someone had suffered in that apartment. Because buried beneath the horror of Ayden's death was another story, another victim, another dark secret. The crime was brutal. The victim, just a child. And the killer? A man who had lived under the same roof, shared the same space, and held all the power. Now the hunt for justice had begun. Within minutes of discovering Ayden Wolfe's battered body, detectives knew one thing for certain. This wasn't an accident. Every injury told a story, every broken bone, every bruise, every wound. The first question investigators needed to answer: who did this, and why? The crime scene was the first piece of the puzzle, but the real answers would come from elsewhere. Detectives combed through phone records. They pulled messages. They tracked movements. And what they found sent a chill down their spines. Text messages from Ayden's mother hinted at trouble in the home. And then there were the neighbors. I heard screaming that night. It wasn't the first time. More than one person admitted they had heard cries for help before, but no one made the call. March 7th, 2021. Less than 24 hours after Ayden Wolfe's murder, Rashawn Weaver was brought into custody. Tell us what happened that night. At first, he said nothing. Then he lied. I don't know what you're talking about, but the evidence told a different story. As the trial began, the prosecution wasted no time painting a clear picture of who Rashawn Weaver really was. This was not a one-time act of rage. This was a pattern of abuse that ended in murder. And then, another revelation. Weaver had a history of violence, a past littered with warning signs. In court, the jury learned that Ayden wasn't his first victim, but he was the first who didn't survive. The verdict was delivered. Guilty. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. But just when everyone thought this case was closed, an unexpected twist changed everything. Because hidden within the legal paperwork was a loophole, a detail overlooked, a chance for appeal. A child is gone, a brutal crime, a justice system that acted, but was it enough? As we close this case, one question lingers in the air. Who really failed Ayden Wolfe? Rashawn Weaver may have been the one to strike the fatal blow, but was he the only one responsible? The bruises, the missed warning signs, the silent screams. According to reports, there were multiple opportunities to intervene, but no one did. We get hundreds of reports every month. Sometimes, we just don't get to them in time. But time was something Ayden didn't have. His teachers saw the change. His neighbors heard the cries. His own mother sent texts hinting at trouble. Yet no one stepped in. And so we ask again, who really failed Ayden Wolfe? In the aftermath of Ayden's murder, one question remained. Could this tragedy have been prevented? His story sparked outrage, demands for reform, a call to protect children who cannot protect themselves. Laws were revisited, policies questioned, but real change, that takes more than outrage. If you suspect a child is in danger, don't wait. Don't assume someone else will call. One phone call can save a life. But now we turn this question over to you. Who do you think is really responsible for Ayden Wolfe's death? His killer? His mother? The system that ignored the signs? Let's talk in the comments. Your voice matters. If you believe Ayden's story needs to be heard, help us keep his memory alive. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe for more deep dives into the most haunting true crime cases. And if you think this case was shocking, wait until you hear what we've uncovered next.